The Stone Zone, with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and yes, you are back in the Stone Zone. Today we have an extraordinary guest, Lee Smith, the New York Times best-selling author of The Plot Against the President, later made into an extraordinary documentary, but he's back now with a book that literally curled my ears. It is Disappearing the President, an extraordinary work, very broad in its scope, about the systematic effort to destroy Donald Trump and literally erase him from the political stage. First, let me bring in my co-host, Troy Smith, the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.news. Troy, welcome back into the zone.
Roger, as always, an honor to be back with you. We're barreling towards Election Day, and StoneZONE gets more interesting every day. Honored to be with you.
13 days before the election, now that Donald Trump did McDonald's, I understand that Kamala Harris is going to do Five Guys. All right, our guest, Lee Smith. This man is one of the most extraordinary writers, researchers, and thinkers that I've ever met. His new book has an extraordinary scope. I'm just now trying to get through it. It is really, truly breathtaking. Lee Smith joins us now in the Stone Zone.
Roger, thank you so much for those kind words. Nice to be with you today, and nice to see you, Troy, and hi to your great audience.
So your new book, Disappearing the President, is really an extraordinary piece of work because you've gotten the big picture from my point of view. You graciously sent me a galley a couple of days ago. I'm about a third of the way through it, and it really is taking away my breath because you talk not only about the January 6th events, not only about the epic censorship that's going on, not only about the previous coup attempts, Russian collusion, which you probably know more about than anyone on the face of the planet, the 2 phony impeachments, and now, of course, these breathtaking attempts to assassinate him. I almost don't know where to start. But folks, this book is really quite extraordinary. Why don't we begin at the beginning? You kind of lay out an unprecedented campaign that includes domestic spying, election rigging, brute force censorship, and political violence. The anti-Trump zealots have undermined all of the institutions, both public and private, in their drive to destroy Donald Trump. Lee, how did you even begin to undertake this? Because it is really breathtaking in scope.
Well, thank you, Roger. I really appreciate that. I mean, really, especially coming from you, someone who's written about some of the most momentous events in American history, and from LBJ and JFK, Richard M. Nixon. So I really appreciate those kind words. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to provide a comprehensive account so people understand what's been going on the last 8 years. I wanted them to understand the framework, and the other thing I wanted to do, Roger, we speak a lot about, we all speak a lot about this. And as I point out in the first chapter, we talk about the deep state. We use words like the system, or we use words like the blob or the managerial class or whatever. And what I really wanted to do was I really wanted to help readers to and all of us to understand what's been going on here, and to talk about it in terms of the deep state as an abstraction. This is a political fight, and it's a political fight that we need to win. And so what I did here was I showed who's been driving this anti-Trump crusade for the last 8 years. And as it turns out, it's his predecessor, Barack Obama. And in fact, Donald Trump identified as much in March 2017 when he tweeted out that Obama had his phones tapped at Trump Tower, right? And we all remember the response: "Oh, Trump is crazy. He's exaggerating. How dare he?" This was the response from the Never Trump right, as well as, of course, the Democrats and the media. As it turns out, what I do here is I show how all of these campaigns, whether it's the surveillance campaign, as we know about, the FBI's surveillance campaign against Trump started with Obama. I show how the censorship campaign started with Obama as well, shortly after the 2016 election. And most crucially, I show how the political violence started with Barack Obama as well. And that's when he, under Obama's directions, his CIA director, John Brennan, created the intelligence community assessment, saying that Donald Trump owed the White House, owed his victory to Vladimir Putin. And that's what split the country right there, accusing not just the opposition leader, Donald Trump, but his supporters as well of supporting, of being beholden to a foreign power. So it's true when people say that the press has been inciting violence against Trump. The Democrats have been inciting violence against Trump. And I have lots of that in here too. But the most crucial piece of this is January 2017, when Obama starts it off by accusing, again, half of the country of being un-American. That divided us right there. And the way forward is to understand clearly what's happened, to understand who's behind it, who's driving it, on behalf of what causes, whose interest, and with what money, right? So that's what I really wanted to do here. Lay out the anti-Trump operation and who's driving it. And also, look, the picture, we talk about the pictures from the Butler rally being iconic, and of course they are, but they're also tremendously inspirational. I mean, they're just amazing how that we are so blessed to have a powerful opposition, people like you, so many others who've stood up with Donald RFK Jr., Elon Musk, just such a powerful opposition, and so many opposition leaders, and the man who's at the head of the opposition, Donald J. Trump. So I mean for it also to be an inspiring story and an inspiring account.
Some people say that the opposition to Donald Trump began when he came down the elevator in 2016. I actually don't think that's true. I think that the bipartisan neocon establishment in our country made the mistake of not taking Trump seriously as a candidate. They bought into this caricature of him, which was, I think, not only a misreading, but they also misread the country. In other words, they didn't realize how tired and distrustful the American people were at that point of essentially all institutions, both parties, Congress, but for the first time ever, also deeply distrustful of the establishment media, particularly the legacy media. So I think the decision to try to destroy Trump actually begins with his election, which of course they never saw coming. The Clintons have deep presidential campaign experience. Bill and Hillary both worked on George McGovern's campaign. Bill Clinton ran the McGovern campaign in Texas as the campaign manager. So between the two of them, they have multiple big picture campaign experience. Trump is an amateur and he does it his way. I would argue they never see him coming. But even today, I think you're absolutely right. It's important to establish who's leading this conspiracy. In a way, your book is what John Durham's report should have been. In other words, for so long, 5 long years, they assured us that Special Counsel John Durham would get to the bottom of what happened in the so-called Russian collusion hoax. And the truth is, he barely skims the surface of it. He never, for example, even delves into the question of whether the Democrat National Committee was ever the target of an online hack by Russian intelligence or anyone else for that matter, that being a perfect example. But let's get into Obama's role here. Delve into that for us, if you would.
Well, I just want to tie that back into what you said about John Durham, which is fascinating, because whenever I heard about, whether it was Bill Barr, and Roger, you'll see that William Barr is one of the not good guys in the book. He's actually a very serious villain, and for different reasons. Um, but what I always wanted from John Durham was not a report. John Durham, these are guys, these are the guys with the badges and the guns, right? We wanted accountability. That's what we wanted, not just a report, right? So what this really is what I've decided to do is I've decided to basically draw up a map, right? Saying here's who did what, here's how it happened, here's how they did it, right? Because I'm very hopeful for a Donald Trump victory. And I think that the American people, whether they're Trump supporters or not, we deserve accountability. So this is one of the reasons why it's essential to put Barack Obama in the center of this, right? As I was doing the research, as I was doing the writing of the book, I have to say there were different things that surprised me. I had no idea, for instance, that Barack Obama made classified intercepts available to basically every bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. Before Obama, you had to go through the National Security Agency. There were different protocols. I quote a couple of FBI whistleblowers in here who explain how that used to be. But with Barack Obama, he made all of that intelligence available throughout the bureaucracy, which is insane. The purpose of that was only to augment the surveillance campaign against Donald Trump, as well as leak to the press. I also didn't quite grasp how the censorship campaign also began with Barack Obama. And it begins about a week and a half after the 2016 election, when he corrals Mark Zuckerberg at a conference in Lima, Peru, and reads him out for giving Trump access to Facebook, which is one of the instruments that Donald Trump used to great effect to win in 2016. So that's really the signal. Obama is really signaling that that's the beginning of the censorship campaign. Trump has to be silenced, right? And so this is something that we've seen building for 8 years. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there is the political violence component as well. So all of this really starts with Barack Obama. And if you see, it's really astonishing, Roger, because of course no one in the mainstream press will talk about it, even though it's extraordinarily odd. The fact that Barack Obama is the first president since Woodrow Wilson to stay in Washington, D.C. in a century. And of course, Wilson suffered from a debilitating stroke. He didn't even run the White House for the last year and a half of his presidency. This in itself is just bizarre. Why? Former presidents were keen to get out of Washington, D.C. to show that there was no interference, that there was nothing interfering with the peaceful transfer of executive authority, right? So we hear so much about how January 6th, Trump was interfering with the peaceful transfer of power. Well, of course, that's nonsense. But to go back to where that really happened, that's with Barack Obama. And just by the fact he was staying in Washington, D.C., never mind the fact that he publicly set up a shadow White House less than a mile from the actual White House, right, is shocking. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring this out to people, and we see friends on social media, and maybe they feel a little bit tentative about saying, well, maybe that's Obama who's doing all this. I said, yes, it's okay to say that Barack Obama is doing it, because Barack Obama keeps waving his hand to say, yes, it's me. When there was when Biden was pushed out of the campaign for 2024, Obama aides are leaking regularly to the press saying, here's what Barack is thinking. Here's what Obama wants. Well, we don't know. Here's what Obama is doing. So when everyone says that, when everyone in the Democratic Party says, actually, the leader of the party is the guy who's pulling all the strings here, it's okay for Republicans. It's okay for the America First movement to say, since they're saying it, I guess it's okay. We can now acknowledge that the person who's pulling the strings, the shadow presidency, is real. It's Barack Obama. So that's one of the things I really wanted to do, to give people not just the background into what's happened, but also the confidence to say, we can come out and speak the truth. It's all right. Don't be scared of being called a conspiracy theorist or a nut. They're saying it. Let's acknowledge reality.
Folks, once again, the book is Disappearing the President, and you can get the book at encounterbooks.com. Urge you to order your copy. This book will take your breath away. You've really kind of wrapped it all up. I mean, other people have written about January 6th or about the Russian collusion hoax or the Ukrainian controversies. This is stunning in its sweep. Speak, if you would, to the role of, I consider them the main perps here. We're talking about Mark Elias, Andrew
Yeah.
Weissman, Troy, you can help me here on this list.
Yeah.
I mean, Neil Keitel,
Yeah.
and
Nor-
company, Norm.
Norm Eisen, sure. These are people. They're part of what I call Obama's shadow network. There's the shadow president, the shadow presidency, and the shadow network. And look, I mean, a lot of these names are known. That's the other thing, Roger and Troy, I should say. It's not like I'm pulling any mysteries out of my magic hat here. We know these names: George Soros. We know the money, Pierre Omidyar. You know, we know the lawyers, Norm Eisen, Mark Elias. You're absolutely right. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted people to see it's not just a deep state with thousands of people rolled up with their shirt sleeves somewhere in Foggy Bottom or somewhere out in Northern Virginia. It's a bunch of people who show up on MSNBC, CNN all the time, and if they're not always answering to orders from Barack Obama or Susan Rice directly, right? It's a network, and we know what they're pushing because they've been doing it since even before 2008. But of course, the lawyers are very important. And right now, we're into Mark Elias's specialty, which is elections. And so I have a long I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, but there's a long passage on what Mark Elias did heading into the 2020 election. And we've seen he's been very active during this election cycle as well. There's something else in there. There's also a very important operation in 2020, the Transition Integrity Project, run by a woman named Rosa Brooks. Well, Rosa Brooks is now running something called the Democracy Futures Project. And I have a section in there explaining what their scenarios are for this coming election. I'm happy to, do you want me to fill you in a little bit on what they're saying is going to happen for 2024?
Yes, we'll get there. We'll get there just in one moment. Mark Elias, of course, showed up in my courtroom in my trial. My lawyers, my defense attorneys, were denied the CrowdStrike memo. We were not allowed to have that for my defense. Elias showed up to argue that that was proprietary and that it was should not be made available to us. And of course, Judge Amy Berman Jackson decided not to give it to us. Now, of course, we know why. Once Sean Henry, who just happened to be Robert Mueller's deputy at the FBI, now the head of cybersecurity for CrowdStrike, finally testified before the House Intelligence Committee under oath, he actually admitted what we now know, what was that CrowdStrikes had no evidence whatsoever that the DNC had been hacked by Russian intelligence or anyone else. The judge also, of course, denied me the right to call expert witness Bill Binney or to provide forensic evidence in which I could have proved that there was no hack of the DNC. To me, there are kind of two main legs to this stool. One, of course, was the Steele dossier. And here Durham did a half-decent job of exposing what that was. He doesn't even touch the fraudulent claim that the DNC is the subject of a hack, or that anyone in the Trump campaign is the recipient of emails or even early warning that WikiLeaks is going to publish embarrassing material, which of course is never questioned in its authenticity, but has a devastating effect on Hillary's campaign. Troy, next question to you, and then I'm going to come back and we'll talk a little bit about what.
Can I just say something? Can I just say something about that quickly? I'm sorry. But Roger, there's another important name in there, and this name surfaced recently when Bob Woodward has been promoting his new book, claiming that Trump's former director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, was saying that he believes that Putin is blackmailing Trump. Well, it was Dan Coats who, as DNI, had all of this congressional testimony, and he held on to these transcripts. So Dan Coats is one of the unacknowledged villains of Russiagate. Very bad guy. So when he's going on and talking with, giving Woodward this garbage about Putin blackmailing Trump, it's important to remember that he covered up all of this information. Trump was, he hung out Trump to dry for years. This congressional testimony would have cleared you. It would have cleared dozens of other people as well, including the president himself, because they never had any evidence of collusion, conspiracy, or anything like that. So Coates, bad guy.
Well, and Bob Woodward is not a credible source. I mean, first of all, Bob Woodward lies throughout Watergate. Bob Woodward denies his own past as a naval intelligence officer, where he briefed Al Haig when he was the deputy to National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger. He lies about the identity of Deep Throat. No, Deep Throat is not Mark Felt. You can read that in both of my books on Nixon and Watergate. He lies about the Iran-Contra controversy, claims that he got access to former CIA Director Bill Casey's hospital room, where Casey was hospitalized suffering from a debilitating brain tumor, when the records from security show that he never gained entrance to Casey's room. And at a time that Woodward claims Casey confessed his entire role in the Iran-Contra controversy, trading arms for hostages, at a time that Casey's wife and his son both told me for my book that Bill Casey no longer had the capacity of speech because of his brain tumor. He also lies about the origins of the Iraq War. He lies about John Belushi in his book Wired. This guy's entire life is one.
Right.
I've got
one entire fiction. No, that's great. I mean, that's a fantastic accounting of the career of the, Washington's most famous tell-all journalist, who in fact tells fictions all the time.
Yeah, I have a Substack piece up on this called "The Lies of Bob Woodward." The problem was the piece is way too long because I didn't know when to stop. There's so much there. Coach, this is news to me and something I haven't gotten to yet in the book.
Yeah.
Troy, question to you.
Absolutely, Mr. Smith. One of the biggest differences between the tech landscape between 2020 and 2024 is the fact that Elon Musk purchased Twitter. Elon Musk has also gone out on the campaign trail for Trump. He was campaigning this weekend in Pennsylvania. I have a clip of him campaigning in Pennsylvania. Then I want to get your reaction right after to the differences between that tech landscape with Elon Musk now entering the picture. Let's roll that.
That's why I think this is the most important election of our lifetime. President Trump is the only one who can save democracy. So, yeah. Yeah. Fight, 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 fight.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Lee, your thoughts.
Well, two things here. Yes, that Elon Musk, but there's also Truth Social. Truth Social is in the subtitle of the book, and I mean, they threw Donald Trump off of social media in 2021, and so he talks. It's very moving, actually. The interviews I have with the president. He talks about how he didn't have a voice, right? And he said, I had important things to say, and a lot of people wanted to hear from me. So Truth Social is very important in that way, and that became his voice. And Truth Social still is his voice. He's back on Twitter as well. There's no doubt that, and I have stuff on Elon Musk in here as well, the social media, and how important his purchase of Twitter has been. So that's really big, and that's changed the media landscape generally, not just social media. So Troy, I agree, it's really important. There's something else that's really important here too, though. In 2020, what the voting, let me put it like this, the voting or the ballot irregularities, right? They felt that they could get away, the regime felt it could get away with virtually anything It could treat January 6th defendants like insects, right? It could crush them like kulaks. It didn't matter. No one was paying attention. Who cared, right? They're just a bunch of deplorables. We can stick them away forever. Well, it's a little different now going to 2024 when you have big tech people, Elon Musk in the lead, when you have Democrats like RFK Jr., and when you have finance people, Wall Street people like Bill Ackman, who are behind Donald Trump. So uh, they're tangling with some very big players if they think that they're going to try to get away with the same thing. The world looks very different right now. And a lot of that has to do with Elon Musk's support for Donald Trump. But there's other people who, having moved in that direction too, there's a lot of attention on them now. I have no doubt that they're going to try all sorts of fancy tricks over the next few months, unfortunately. But again, they're going to have to understand that there are very powerful people who are watching, and it's not just Donald J. Trump and Trump's aides and supporters. There are people with a lot of power and a lot of money all over this country. So if they're going to start pulling stuff, it's a very different story in 2024. Thank God.
You make an excellent case. One thing I see now that's different is obviously the Russian collusion hoax was orchestrated from behind the scenes. The two impeachments, I should say, orchestrated from behind the scenes. Now, people like Mary McCord and others, they're very out front about their plans. I mean, Jamie Raskin can be seen on videotape saying, we don't really care who wins the election. We're not going to certify the election of Donald Trump, which is particularly ironic in view of the fact that they claim that when Trump challenged the certification of the elections based on the Electoral College Act, by the way, there is no such thing as a fake elector. That's a made-up term by the talking heads at MSNBC. We know in the 1960 election that John Kennedy filed a slate of alternative electors because there was a dispute in Hawaii as to who had carried the state. It appeared on election night that Vice President Nixon had carried Hawaii. Kennedy correctly thought that once all the absentees came in, which were traditionally, overwhelmingly Democrat, that he would carry the state. Indeed, he did, and his alternative electors were seated. No one charged John Kennedy with a crime because there was no crime. But now they're very brazen. The Georgetown clique, Mary McCord, the Democracy Project, whatever they're calling themselves this time, they're very out front about their intentions. Now you add to that a couple things. One, this new Department of Defense directive, which seems to me to legitimize the use of lethal force by the military against American citizens. And then you have a troubling executive order that was originally put in place by Donald Trump, who I think was fighting the Russian collusion narrative in the media, but which authorizes the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, and the National Security Director of National Intelligence to determine the level of foreign interference in the election. Biden several weeks ago renewed that executive directive, that executive order. Now you add to this decision announced by the FBI, they're going to be placing FBI agents at polling places. I don't know if that's intimidation. When I said the Republicans need to get themselves better lawyers, and their lawyers need to know how to find the duty judge in each federal circuit after hours in case they need to file an emergency motion. And then when they get their motion, they might need security when they return to the polling place because the left is violent. I'm accused of trying to put armed guards at the polling places. Not what I said. I'm accused of somehow fixing the judges, which is an absurdity. The way the media twists everything you say is really is quite extraordinary. A week ago, I spoke to the Jacksonville Young Republicans, and yes, in my remarks months ago, I said I thought there was over 1 million illegitimate, not real voters on the voter lists in the swing states, and that they needed to be legally removed. Headline: Stone's plan for coup in the 2024 election revealed. You can't make this stuff up. It's really quite extraordinary. Lee, the question is, Why are they now so brazen? Is it because they've gotten away with everything to date?
I think so. I think well, this is one of the problems. To come back to John Durham, to come back to William Barr, no one was ever held accountable for 2016, and that green lighted the 2020 operation. And of course, no one has been held accountable for 2020 since they weren't for 2016. So why not do it for 2024 as well? So that's part of the brazenness, and that's when we're talking about people like Mary McCord or Mark Elias, stuff like that. We're talking about the press. I mean, the press, Roger. I believe that the press has entered. I think this happened 8 years ago. That the press has entered a very different phase. We no longer have a working press, right? And this is why one of the reasons I find it disappointing that so many Republicans treat stuff like CNN or MSNBC. Well, we're going to go on and try to reach their viewers. I'm like, you can't get through that wall, right? They've created these things for a reason. These are third world style messaging operations, right? It's third world style media. So the idea that they can just spin everything around or just invent stuff. I mean, comically, we saw how they responded to President Trump's tour at McDonald's over the weekend. I mean, they lost their minds, right? But you see how they responded to this, how they try to block information, they shape information, how they create stories, right? Not just shape narratives. They make stuff up out of whole cloth. So I think the more that we can move away from their media, the more that we can not shut them down, but shut them off so that we're not paying attention. I believe that it's better off. And look at the effect that they're having on so many other parts of the country. I'd like to believe that that there's a lot of Democrats out there who are sick about what's happening to the country, whether it's open borders, whether it's the monetization of sterilizing and butchering children, whether it's the billions of dollars that have gone off to Ukraine. I believe that there are lots of Democrats out there who, if they actually knew what was happening, they'd be very upset about this, but they don't, because we have a third world style messaging operation that replaced our free press, and this happened many years ago. And right now, I don't think there's any salvation for any of these places. But thank goodness we have a lot of media of our own, like the StoneZOne, that gives people good information, tells them where to find other pieces of good information. So we're doing fine. Unfortunately, that's a very poisoned part of the information ecosystem right now.
Yeah, they're very, very angry that they no longer have a monopoly on discourse. Yeah. This is why I love Truth Social. I mean, I'm on Truth Social as real Roger Stone because, well, somebody else has my handle, but that's fine. I love Truth Social because it lets you educate people who agree with you, first of all, and get the facts to them so they can spread the facts. I'm grateful to be back on X, where I'm Roger J. Stone Jr. The biggest offender here is Google. Try doing a Google News search on Donald Trump. Just try it, just for laughs. The first 7 pages, every single story is negative, slanted. There's a lot of disinformation. I hate to use that word, but a lot of disinformation there. And then let's just say that you subscribe to the StoneZOne at StoneZONE.com. Well, if you have a Gmail address, despite the fact that you're in our white mail and you've approved us blasting you a notice of what's coming up that week on our show, it will go to your spam box. It will not. Wow. It will not go to your email. When I had a legal defense fund, because I had to raise $3.5 million for my legal defense after the Mueller witch hunt bankrupted me and my wife, after we lost my home, my savings, my insurance. I had to sell my car. I had to sell my electric guitar to pay for legal fees. I had to go out and raise that money. And look, I appreciate the prayers and the contributions from literally tens of thousands of people. But if you sent me a contribution and you're at Gmail, when I tried to recontact you, it would not go to you. It would go to your spam file, or it wouldn't go anywhere. Google is absolutely among the worst offenders here.
Well, I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of stuff in this book. It's a section where how Obama basically absorbed big tech, and Google, especially starting in 2012 election. I mean, Google is a key player, in the Obama, in the Obama shadow network. So that's terrible to hear what they've, what they did to you. But yeah, Google is absolutely a a major problem for communications in this country.
What's interesting, of course, now that most people presume, I don't think anything's baked in the yet, but there's a growing perception that Donald Trump is likely to win the next election. So now you have the owners of Facebook, the owners of Google, trying to suck up to him and saying, "Oh, well, this time's going to be different, and we're really not censoring." But the truth is, they are. They continue to do the same thing that they did
Right.
In 2020. Uh, Lee, you introduced this subject. What can we be looking for here going forward? I've told you my concerns. You already have the Attorney General announcing that anyone who interferes with the election process on election day will be prosecuted. Well, what does that mean? Asking questions? Is asking questions, does that define interference? Because I think every American has a right to ask questions. Then he further, a couple of days later, he says any challenge to the certification of the election will be prosecuted. These, to me, are ominous signs of what is to come. But let's find out what you think.
Well, let's remember that. It's going to be, Kamala Harris who's certifying the election. And as you mentioned before, we saw what Jamie Raskin has already said. We've seen what President Biden has said about, believing that Trump will not accept the results, and that Trump supporters will become violent. Yeah, Roger, Troy. Every scenario that I've seen from the left has. I wouldn't say anticipates violence, but I'd say is inciting violence, because this is how these scenarios need to be understood. And this is why one of the reasons why the messaging has become so brazen, because they want to alert people to what future operations look like. So with Rosa Brooks and the Democracy Futures Project, interestingly, they assume a Trump victory, but they also anticipate violence so widespread that President Trump would need to invoke the Insurrection Act, at which point some of the military will reject his orders and resign, and then Donald Trump will have to get other people who will fulfill those orders. But what that's really describing is a split in the armed forces, which is extremely dangerous. So this is what I've seen. They have, in every possible scenario, they've baked violence into it. Whether Donald Trump wins, whether Donald Trump loses, there will be violence. But remember, January 6th, the way that I see it, January 6th is this regime's only source of legitimacy, right? Well, we see it on the campaign, and they talk about, Kamala Harris is preserving democracy, or yes, no one can protest the results of elections. If you do, you'll wind up the way the January 6th defendants have been. You'll wind up impoverished, and you'll likely wind up spending the next decade or more in jail. So, this is what they did 4 years ago. I have little doubt that that this is part of their program for the upcoming election, and we'll see. Roger, I was really impressed to hear you say that. Here's what you recommend at different polling places, which is great. I hope that the campaign, I hope the RNC is listening to what you're saying, and I hope that there are other people who are advising the campaign with the knowledge and experience that you have. Because going into this election, I think it's so important. We're also optimistic about, we see the excitement and the optimism of the Trump campaign and all the people who have joined forces. But all Americans are also, and all Americans who are alert to what's been happening, are also concerned about a repeat of what we saw 4 years ago. So how do we ensure election integrity? It seems to me, listening to the advice of people like you and others with the experience and the wisdom would be a huge leg up.
Well, let me say this. We certainly are much better prepared than we were 4 years ago. It is some of these problems are more difficult than others. Clearly, for example, when the governor of Virginia seeks to remove people who are not eligible to vote from the voting rolls, and the Justice Department sues him, and their whole argument is it's too close to the election, which seems to me to be a non sequitur. Either these people or these registrants are eligible or they're not eligible. It doesn't matter whether it's a month before the election, whether it's the day
Right.
before the election. They're either
Right.
eligible
If
or they're not.
if they're dead, right? If they're dead, it doesn't matter whether that's uncovered a month before the election or a year before the election. Sorry, there are there are 250,000 dead people on the voter rolls. Let's get them out of here, or people who have moved. Right? I entirely agree. But this is where we are right now. The Justice Department, law enforcement agencies, are making these cases, which just to regular Americans. I mean, it's more of the era of 2 + 2 = 5. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Troy, do you have a question for Lee?
Absolutely. Lee, we've been talking a lot about General Mark Milley on this show recently because we did an interview with Gordon Chang where he discussed, the calls between Milley and China and the really treasonous activity. A lot of people are looking at what happened to President Trump, and they look at China's ascension during that same time where these people have kind of either turned a blind eye or they're actively helping China. What's your position on this? Do you think these people are so focused on Trump that they've allowed China to grow out of control, or is this part of the plan? Are they? I mean, can you tell us what you think here?
No, I think well, the Mark Milley thing is funny, right? Because that brings us back to Bob Woodward, because that's that was first reported in that Woodward book, and it was interesting to see how all of Washington was celebrating Milley for his willingness to stand up to Trump's like, but what he said was what he said was he vowed to share intelligence of U.S. troop movements in the event of a conflict with an adversary, and why that was celebrated in Washington. That just shows you where people are. Well, look, the way that I look at China, and I'm working on a book on China right now. The way that I look at China's it was Donald Trump who pointed out what a problem China is for the United States. And the reason that we had to wait to Donald Trump is because every other American official, both on the right and the left, has a lot of problems with China, meaning they're tied into the Chinese. So the way that I understand it is China is a very big problem for our country. The bigger problem is the people who are tied into China, right? Because they're protecting China from the inside. And Joe and Hunter Biden are just the very tip of the matter, right? I mean, we see people across the political and corporate establishment who are so knitted to China, and that's going to be Donald Trump's if Donald Trump is elected president, reelected, that's going to be one of his problems, moving aside some of these people who are there to defend the interest of China and to defend the interest of Wall Street, as it turns out now, because now Wall Street is the real I guess it's the real Chinese firewall, we would put it, but protecting China. So I don't think it's that their attention has been diverted. I think that this has been going on for decades, in fact.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Lee Smith. He is the author of Disappearing the President, a terrific new book. You can order this book by going to encounterbooks.com. You do want to order this book. It is really astonishing. This is the broadest look I've ever seen, not just on what's going on today, but basically the efforts of an entrenched establishment that has deep ties with the establishment media to destroy Donald Trump. This encompasses not only the past, but it also takes a look at the future. Leah, I want to address the question of the 2 known assassination attempts on Donald Trump. We here, I think, were among the first to interview Vem Miller, a man incorrectly accused by the Riverside County Sheriff's Office of planning the assassination of Donald Trump in California. Miller is a Trump supporter. He's been to 20 previous Trump events. He's met the president and the first family. If you go look at the claims against him, no, he did not have a forged passport. That was a lie. No, his pass to the rally was not a counterfeit. That's a lie. He had a permit for the firearm that was locked in his trunk. He may have violated California, he may have violated Nevada law because his shotgun was registered in California, but both firearms are locked in the trunk, and he tells the police officer that he has them but has no intention of taking them out of the car. So I don't buy the fact that that's a third assassination attempt. I wrote a long piece on this as well. I think we debunked it in an interview here with Van Miller, whose show I've been on. He's interviewed me about my book on the Kennedy assassination. But I guess here is the focus. In my book on the Kennedy assassination, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, which I'm proud to say is a New York Times bestseller, I documented the fact that the Secret Service very clearly laid down on President John F. Kennedy. They violate all their own rules and protocols, which you can find in their manual. Now we examine the events in Butler and the events in West Palm Beach at the Trump golf course. Based on your examination, Lee, what have you concluded about these? Because the government is doing the same thing they did in the case of JFK. In that case, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI took an entire 7 days to finish their entire investigation. Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone nut acting alone, fired 3 shots from behind, killing John F. Kennedy, case closed. Now, Arlen Specter and the Warren Commission, you guys go rubber stamp it, and they did. And of course, the truth has slowly come out over time. I see an analogous situation here with these 2 assassination attempts, but I'm interested to hear what you see there.
Well, one of the shocking things, I mean, the FBI has made none of this public, none of their investigation, and you'd think it would be a pretty urgent thing, and they would try to respond to all of the criticism that they've rightfully rightfully been directed at the FBI over the last 8 years, and they would say, "Look, we understand this is a very serious thing, the attempt on the life of a former president." And the Republican candidate is a very serious thing, and we're going to continuously brief the American people every day. And then maybe after a couple of weeks, say, well, every Friday we're going to update them. But there's been nothing like that. Everything has been buried. So this should be a huge concern. We can't be surprised that the press has virtually buried the fact of the 2 attempts on the president's life. But so that's certainly very worrisome, and I think that people right now are. I think that most people are giving the Secret Service, are crediting them. I guess we would put it by saying, well, it's incompetence, perhaps not malice, though we may find it's malice. Look, I looked into this the so-called Iran plot against Donald Trump, and what I found out was that. The Iranians definitely want to kill Donald Trump, and they want to kill Trump aides for the targeted assassination of Qasem Soleimani. But the so-called Iran plot, this was not an Iranian plot. This was a plot that was hatched by the FBI. In fact, they brought this guy, Asif Merchant. They brought him. He showed up at an airport. He showed up at the Dallas airport. Customs and Border Patrol wasn't going to let them in, but the FBI wanted him to come in, so they hatched a plot around this guy, Asif Merchant. Were they trying to get Asif Merchant to kill Donald Trump? No, I don't think so. What I think they were doing, well, first of all, they're boosting FBI statistics, but also quite clearly they're doing 2 other important things. They're deflecting attention from the fact is the people who are trying to kill Donald Trump are Democratic Party supporters. That's one, right? The other part of this is they're trying to keep Donald Trump off, and I'll be writing an article about this hopefully sometime this week. What they want to do is they want to keep Donald Trump off stage, right? This is where Donald Trump lives, and he breathes out in the full air. Right. And this is one of the things that hurt Donald Trump in 2020 with all of these press conferences inside in the White House. And this was just a drag down President Trump. He needs to be outside with people breathing the fresh American air, joking, having exchanges with Americans. Well, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of evidence that both the Secret Service and the FBI have been keen to keep Donald Trump off stage. Right. Some of it's been reported. Some of it I'll be providing original reporting for. But so those are the 2 reasons why these, why the FBI and why the Secret Service are frankly, at the very least, we can say not working hard enough to protect Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, you make an excellent point. It's interesting to me, the parallels. So within within the 2 hours immediately after the assassination of John Kennedy, the Secret Service actually hoses down the inside of the limousine, destroying any evidence that might be there. Kind of analogous with the FBI hosing down the roof of the building from which the sniper shot. Is that an effort to ensure that there's no intact DNA? That's my guess. Maybe it has to do with identifying the killer, who the authorities insist is this man, Thomas Matthew Crooks, which may or may not be correct. I mean, once again, we don't know. We're taking their word for it. But just that small example of the same misconduct.
There's so many questions that really need to be answered, and we don't have answers to any of them. And because we don't have answers, because the FBI isn't answering any questions, there's so much confusion out there. For instance, I hear people every now and then get on TV or a podcast, and they say, well, that the shot that Crooks took at Trump only 130 yards away. I mean, that's a layup, and I'm like, well, it's a layup if you're a trained shooter, right? If you've done a lot of shooting, it's not a layup for a 20-year-old guy. So how much was he shooting? How much training did he have? And like, it wasn't a body shot. He was going for his head. A guy moving around on stage, not easy. Right. So what kind of training did he have? Do we know? No, we don't know. All of these questions that are still outstanding. And it's only reasonable that the American people not only want answers to these questions, but in lieu of these answers, in the absence of answers to their questions, they're going to go to places that are not going to give the FBI or the Secret Service the benefit of the doubt. That's only reasonable. And of course, our federal intelligence services and law enforcement should know that. And of course, they do know that. And in fact, that's one of the things they're doing. They're ramping up the paranoia. They're ramping up the fear. And it's disgraceful, but not surprising as I account in disappearing the president. We've been seeing this for at least 8 years now of what the FBI and other security services have been doing, not just to Donald J. Trump, but to the American public in general.
I still find it extraordinary, based on reports, that Apple will not turn access of Mr. Crook's phone over to the FBI. Now, interestingly, they did this previously. They refused to make the availability of the San Bernardino shooter available. They said it would set a dangerous precedent because that was private information. Yet Apple had no problem whatsoever handing over all of my records to the
right. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. Look, this story starts with Donald Trump. How? It starts with the fact that they had a surveillance warrant on all of Donald Trump's electronic communications, right? Well, starting with Carter Page, but with the way that all of that is collected, they had Donald Trump's communications as well. They of course they had yours as well, Roger. Anyone who was on that campaign, they were collecting all of their electronic communications. So the idea is like, oh no, Apple won't let us in, so we don't know what Crooks was talking about or who he was speaking with. It's absolutely preposterous, right? The FBI is more than capable of doing it themselves without getting some sort of help from Apple. Like, Apple is such special encryption, intelligence services around the world can't get through iPhones. It's absolute nonsense. But that's what I mean. It's more of this stuff that's coming from the FBI that every American can see through clearly. So let me get this straight. They can go down, they can get anything they want from Google or from Verizon or any other service provider, but somehow Apple and Tim Cook is blocking the FBI from finding out what was on this assassin's cell phone. Nonsense.
Yeah, not credible. Troy and I we're also waiting for Leslie Stahl, because I think she owes the president an apology. I mean, when the president said on 60 Minutes that his campaign was spied on, she vehemently denied it, and she quite pompously said, look, we're 60 Minutes. We can't put things on the air that we can't prove. Troy and I are still waiting for her apology, because there is no question that Donald Trump's campaign was spied on.
Yeah. There will be no apology. I mean, I'm glad that President Trump is suing. I guess I don't know if he's suing just the Post and the Times or maybe the Pulitzer Committee as well. I remember for my book, Plot Against the President, I asked if they wanted to comment on that nonsensical Pulitzer. They awarded the Post and the Times for the Russiagate coverage. And their response was, "Oh, we're very proud of what we did." So I'm happy that the president's pushing it, but I mean, again, this is the media we're dealing with. This is not going back 20 or 30 years where you had a left or a liberal media, but it was at least the media. You have a very different thing right now.
All right. One more time, folks. The book is Disappearing the President.
I'm sorry.
It is,
I have a 4-year-old who walked in. I'm gonna ask him to get out right now. He's got a cool fire truck book. All right,
it's okay.
Og, we'll see.
Only
We'll
got
see
a
the
few
bit,
more
Chad.
minutes here. We're fine. We're fine, and
Sorry.
we're kid friendly here in the Stone
All
Zone.
right.
It's folks. Again, the book is Disappearing the President. You can order your copy of it at encounterbooks.com. This is a book you absolutely do not want to miss. Get your copy of it today. Lee, tell people where folks can follow you also. I read your article about the so-called Iranian plot. I found it devastating. Of course, the media says that I'm among those who the Iranians have hacked my personal email. I have no evidence of that. But tell us where people can follow you on a regular basis.
I'm sorry, it just cracks me up. I didn't know that they said that, but of course now they're going to blame everything on the Iranians. So Barack Obama decides to legalize Iran's nuclear program, but now the Iranians are look. I think the Iranians are really, really bad guys. But the idea now that this regime is going to blame everything on the Iranians, everything that it's doing, and blaming it on Iran is preposterous. Sorry. Yeah. Lee Smith, at Lee Smith DC on Twitter, at Lee Smith, on Truth Social. And, really, I hope that everyone gets a chance to read the book. I think it's important. Again, I really lay out in a comprehensive fashion what's happened the last 8 years. And again, it's very important that we have the names, and we have the network right. If we just talk about it in terms of an abstraction, the deep state, that's to commit ourselves to an unwinnable war against the DMV. It's important that we put names on this and figure out what's going on. And I want to thank you, Roger, and thank you, Troy, for letting me come on today and talk about those names and talk about those networks and give people a little sense of what's in the book.
All right. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Lee Smith. Urge you to order your copy of his incredible book, Disappearing the President. Also thank my colleague, Troy Smith, from Slingshot.news, and remind you until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?